notification on, you can also unmute yourself and ask out loud. All right, if you want to learn more about Our Ladies, either the St. Louis chapter or the global organization, you can visit the ourladies.org website, or you can connect with Our Ladies St. Louis. We have an email address, a Twitter handle, and Meetup. I would say probably the fastest way to get my attention would be the Twitter handle, because I'm there most days and I'm not as good at checking the Gmail account, although some of my co-organizers might be checking that more often. So you can use any of those ways to get in touch with us if you have an idea for a speaker, if you want to be a speaker, if you want to give some feedback or have any topic ideas, that would be fantastic. And tonight's speakers, I will turn it over to them in just a second here, but want to let you know that Zoey is an advanced standing MSW student at Washington University, and Megan is a first-year MPH student at Washington University. I met both of these students in the public health program in a biostatistics course. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to them, and I will stop sharing my screen, and they can introduce themselves further and start sharing their screens.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Dr. Harris. Zoey, I think she will be sharing her screen. Here we go. Okay. So thank you for that introduction, Dr. Harris. Like she said, my name is Megan, and I'll be presenting here with Zoey. We're both students at WashU. We're happy to be here, and I really appreciate you all taking the time to join us today. Hopefully everything we go over today is helpful. And if you have any questions throughout, like was mentioned before, please pop those in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself or raise your virtual hand, and we'll try to get to those. And I know Dr. Harris, as well as Dr. Cooper, I'm sure will be answering questions along with us, just so we can answer as many of those as we can. All right, so without further ado, we can go ahead and jump in here. So in this presentation, as we already mentioned, we'll be going over the principles of plotting several types of graphs in R using the Ggplot 2 package. So I know Dr. Harris already kind of went over this, but if you haven't already downloaded the packages, Tidyverse in here, go ahead and do that. You'll need to do that using the tools menu at the top of R, at the top of the page of R, and then go to install packages. You can type the name of the packages, so Tidyverse in here, and separate those with a comma. And then once those are downloaded, you'll just need to open them using the library package, which should be in your participant form, that the participant file, excuse me, that code should already be there. So once you download it, you can just run that. So once that is done, go ahead and shoot a thumbs up so I can want to make sure we're all on the same page before I get moving here. I see a few thumbs up already. Give it just another minute or so. And if you have any issues with that, feel free to pop it in the chat or let us know now, and we'll try to help you. Okay, I think the majority of people have put a thumbs up. So if you have any issues, let me know. I'm going to talk through the data set we're going to be using tonight, so you can feel free to finish up downloading everything during that as well. and just let us know if you need us to slow down or if you need us to stop. We can do that. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide, Zoe. And actually, before I get started, I wanted to see how many people have used Ggplot before, or if this is your first time. So if you have used Ggplot before, let's see which reaction. Could you put a hand clap up? And if you, or yeah, we'll just do that for now. Oh, okay, we got quite a few. Cool. Okay. Well, for those of you who have used it before, hopefully this is still helpful. But like I said, we'll be just going through some different types of graphs you can do in Ggplot. But before we get into all that, I wanted to touch on the data set we'll be using. So Dr. Harris mentioned this slightly in her introduction. I personally collected this data set using a survey to assess COVID-19 vaccination intention. I did this back in October of 2020. I got close to 524 total responses, so it was a pretty good feedback. And it was about 19 questions long and just assessing what factors are associated with intention of getting the COVID vaccine. Of course, I'm sure if you think about it, I'm sure some people's answers have probably changed since October of 2020 because a lot has changed since then. But it's a good snapshot in time to see what people were thinking back then, and it's been really interesting to see to actually look at the data set. And with that, I do want to note you all have access to the CSV file, so I don't believe all of the questions from the survey are in there, but the ones we'll be using tonight are. And this was just for a class project at Washington University, so that it didn't go through IRB approval or anything. So the data set really is just for the purposes of this presentation because of that. So just wanted to make that note as well. And so I will also note in another slide here, once we get to that, I'll give you guys an outline of what the actual questions that were asked, just so you have a background when we get to using the variables, what was actually asked of the survey participants. And so to actually bring in the data set, or before I do that, did anyone have any issues downloading Tidyverse or the here package? Any issues with that? Okay, I don't hear any so far. So that being said, the here function helps to bring in the file as long as it's saved in the same folder as the RMD file that you'll be using tonight, which it should be if you just downloaded it from the GitHub link that Dr. Harris sent out. So if those are saved in the same location, you can import the data using the code that's in your participant file, which is also listed here. So go ahead and take a second and bring that in. And again, if there's any issues with that, you can go ahead and let us know and we'll get that sorted out. Anyone having issues getting that data set in? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on. So let's see. Okay, so when you bring that data set in, I think we have a question in the chat. I'll see if Dr. Harris or Dr. Cooper can help them out, and if not, I can pause and we can address that as well. So I'll just go ahead and go through this slide really quick. So when you bring in the data, the variables will be coded as a character variable, which is really not helpful when you're making graphs. It codes it as a string of letters essentially. So we want to change those over to a factor variable. So that's what we're doing here, so that we can use them. And a factor variable just essentially makes it into a categorical variable, so it's more usable for the graphs. And then we can do a quick summary to see some of the counts from those variables, and we'll be playing around with these more in a little bit. And just for your awareness, a lot of the cleaning of the data has already been done. So that's why we don't have to do all of that tonight. Any issues or any questions so far? Okay, we can go ahead and go to the next slide, Zoe. All right, so these are the biggest questions we'll be working with our variables tonight. So we have, once it is available, do you intend to get the vaccine for COVID-19? And that one in the participant file is called vaccination.intention. Then we have you received a flu shot in the past 12 months? That one is flu.shot.history in the R file. The next question, have you received a positive test for COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic? That one is positive.test. Which most closely aligns with your political beliefs? That one is political.beliefs. And lastly, we have I am at risk for contracting COVID-19. And that one was measured using a Likert scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And that one is titled perceived.susceptibility. So just to give you guys a background of what the variables we'll be using tonight actually mean. And then we also will be using age throughout as well, and you'll see that. All right, and then just to give a quick overview of Ggplot itself. So Ggplot is a part of the Tidyverse package, which you all downloaded for this presentation. Ggplot is commonly used for data visualization, so making graphs like what we'll be doing tonight. GG stands for Grammar of Graphics. And you'll see again throughout the night that these graphs are built in layers. So just keep that in the back of your mind. That's really what we'll be showing throughout this presentation, is that these plots are built in layers. And we will be looking at bar plots, box plots, histograms, and also violin plots, depending on how timing goes. So with that, I believe we're ready. Or first off, are there any questions before we jump into the plots and graphs? Or any issues with loading data or anything? Okay, hearing none, we can go ahead. I'll pass the torch over to Zoe and she'll start us off with some basics of looking at our first variable, which is vaccination intention.
Cool. Thanks, Megan. Okay. So we are going to start off with a basic bar graph, and we typically use bar graphs, or this type of bar graph, to see each category in a single categorical variable. So the variable we are going to use for this plot, as Megan said, is vaccination intention. And so the first thing we are going to do is bring in our data. So we have vax data. And then we are using the pipe function from Tidyverse, which is the thing I'm highlighting right here, to bring in Ggplot. And so after that, we are going to put in the variable that we are looking for, which is vaccination.intention. And then this is where it changes. Instead of using the pipe function, we are going to add a layer, which is the addition plus sign, whatever you want to call it. And by doing that, we add a layer. And then our last bit of code for this particular graph is the geom bar. So, which says that we are going to make a bar graph. But if you were going to make like a box plot, it'd be geom box plot, or we'll go through other ones tonight as well. But it just tells you what type of graph you want to make. Okay, and so what this is showing us, so as Megan said, there was about 500 people who answered after the data was cleaned for this particular presentation. We had 475 people. So a little over 250 people said that if they had the option to get the vaccine, they would. And we had a little over 75 people say that they would not. And then a little over 150 people say that they were unsure if they would get the vaccine. So for our next plot, it says fancier bar graph here. It's not super fancy. We're just adding a few more layers, and it's super similar to what we just did. So again, we have our data, and then we use the pipe function to bring in Ggplot, and our variable did not change. We are still using vaccination intention. And then we have GM bar, but this time we are using fill equals, and then slate gray is the color that I chose to fill this graph with. And what we will be doing later is you'll be able to pick colors. That's one of my favorite things to do. And there's a whole range of colors. This happens to be one of my favorites. So the last layer on this particular plot. So when I say layer, we are adding another layer with the addition sign. Oh, sorry, there's 2 more layers after this. We are going to, labs right here stands for labels. So we are going to label the x-axis. So if you remember from the previous plot, we didn't have labels, and so it just had the vaccination dot intention as the x-axis label. And so now we can make it look a little nicer. And then we have number of people on the y-axis, and then the title of the overall graph, the COVID-19 vaccination intention. And so the last layer we are going to add on this bar graph is theme. So the theme just changes the overall look of the graph. So I'll go back so you can see that without it, we have a gray background of lines. And then with adding theme minimal, it takes away the gray. And so there are multiple themes that you can use. And what you would change is the end part, the minimal right here. So if I wanted the graph to be just in black and white, then I would do theme underscore BW, which would then make it black and white. And we'll go through more themes tonight, but this is the one that I normally use. I just like the way it looks the best. Okay, now it's your turn. So you are going to make a bar graph, but this time of flu shot history, which you can see in the code down here. There's this dots in between each of the words. And then by clicking on this link that is in your participant file, you can change the color by replacing slate gray 1. Just make sure it is in between parentheses. And you'll be changing that where it says fill. And then you also want to change the labels because we, instead of measuring or showing vaccination intention, we are doing flu shot history. So once you have done all that, don't forget to press the little green arrow at the right top of the code chunk to run the code. So we'll give you a few minutes to work on that. When you're done, please press the thumbs up button. And if you have any questions, please ask. I know I went through that a little quickly.
I know we've gotten a couple thumbs up, so we'll give you guys a couple more minutes, but anyone running into any issues or any questions that we can help answer?
Or has anyone found a really pretty color that they want to share? You can type that in the box if you want, in the chat. I also like cornflower blue, and you'll see that in an upcoming plot.
I think the majority of people have done a thumbs up. Is anyone still working through this? If so, we can wait to proceed if needed. All right, I think we're good to go, Zoe.
Awesome. Okay. So there's a question in the box. Which, is there a way to make the exterior of the box a certain color? The outline. Dr. Harris, if you want to help me with that, I know how to do it on a different type of plot, but not this one.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Hang on just a second.
Okay, well, this is the plot that you all just made, except we probably used a different color. So we brought in the data. This time we changed the variable to flu shot history. And we used dark cyan. I had to look up how to say that, but I thought the color was pretty. That's why I used it. And then we changed the title and the y-axis as well. And we had to change the x-axis because it was a different variable. And then for this one, the theme, we added a layer and we used theme classic. So it took away the lines as well as the gray background. Okay, before I move on to the next type of plot, does anyone have any questions? Okay, I will take that as a no, so we will move on. So basically, so as we go through this, we are trying to learn about the characteristics of each of the groups that we saw in the vaccination intention. So the yes, they would get a vaccination, no, they wouldn't, or if they were unsure. And so for the box plot, it is used when you have a continuous variable. In our case, it will be age, as well as a categorical variable to see the distribution of the continuous variable for each category in the categorical variable. So our categorical variable for this plot is going to be vaccination intention again. So it's very similar process to what we just went through. So we have the data. We are going to use the pipe function to bring in Ggplot. And then this time we have two variables. So we have x equals our vaccination intention. And then on the y-axis, we want age. So y equals age. And then we are going to add a layer. And this time we are using Geom boxplot. So last time we did Geom bar. And so what this is telling us is that the median age for those who said they would get a vaccine is lower than those who said they would not get a vaccine if it were available. So I'd say about 22 for yes, The median is 22, and then 40 for the no column, and then about 30, yeah, 30 for the don't know, not sure. And then the dots over here are just outliers around the 80 age range, 75, 80 age range. Okay, and so now we are going to add more layers similar to what we did with the box plot. Sorry, not the box plot, the bar graph that we just did. So again, we bring in the data, use the pipe function to bring in Ggplot. And now this is a little different than before. We still have the X and Y that stay the same, but the fill is what just brings colors in. So we are going to fill based on the vaccination intention. So basically each group is going to have a different color. Oop. What did I just do? Am I going forward, backwards? Wrong way. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, this is where we are. So again, we are using genome box plot. And now, because we use the fill equals vaccination intention, we have 3 different colors. And these are just the colors that appear when you use fill. We didn't put like what colors we want, which that will come later. I think these colors look fine. And so next we've already done this. We are adding labels on our x-axis and y-axis, as well as a title. So vaccination intention by age. And so the theme, it's not the theme that I will show here also will help us with the legend position. So we thought that the legend looked a little bit redundant because the graph is pretty clear itself. So we added another layer and we used the theme and legend equals none. So if you wanted to keep the legend but not have it on the right side, you could, or have it on the right side, you could put legend equals right, left, below, or above, and that would move the legend to where you want it. Okay, do we have any questions on this?
And Zoe, I do want to note too, just for everyone's awareness, I should have mentioned this earlier. I did not, for the purpose of this survey, I did not get a super duper representative group of people. It was mostly just shared on social media with my friends and family. So not immediate friends and family necessarily, but I just want everyone to know that that's probably why the ages are not super representative, because I only had 500 people and it was really just shared on social media.
And then when we get to a histogram, which shows a continuous variable, which will be showing age, you'll see that it's not normally distributed. It kind of peaks at the 20, 25-ish kind of grad student age group. And we'll show you that later. Okay, now I am going to give it back to Megan.
Okay, so now, were there any questions? I just want to make sure before we move on the box plot. Okay, just want to double check. So now we will move into bar plots, which we already saw briefly with that very first graph. And Zoe, you can go ahead and go through to the graph.
Yeah, I just want to explain that since I am running the slides, instead of going through each part, Megan will still go through each part, but I'm just going to put all the code out. So she doesn't have to tell me, go next code every single.
Perfect. So with this first bar plot, we're going to show 2 different types tonight. So we have a stacked bar plot and a grouped bar plot, which we'll get to after this one. So this is the stacked one, which is we are calling pretty, but not as useful. So it really just depends on what you're trying to show with your data. But a stacked bar plot is similar to a pie chart that it shows parts of a whole, which you can kind of see here on the right. It takes you a second to really digest what it's trying to say, and especially if where it says flu shot history in that legend, if it were to have 3, 4, 5, 6 categories, it'd be really confusing to try to understand. If you only have 2, it's not too bad. But so we just wanted to show you this so you have the information. But really, for the most part, a grouped bar plot, which we'll show next, is more of the go-to when showing data like this. But really, the code doesn't change a whole lot here. So in this first part, we're just piping in the data per usual into Ggplot. For this one, we're just putting vaccine intention on the X without anything on the Y, just the number of individuals. And we are filling it with flu shot history, which you can see with that legend, and that differentiates the color, so you can see how many people, for example, said yes to vaccine intention, and of those, how many have had a flu shot and how many have not, and so on. So that's what that fill is showing there. And then with the next layer, again, we're just doing the geom bar, which I believe we had that in that very first plot. So this one is geom bar since we're doing a bar plot. And then in this next layer, I believe I saw someone in the chat mention this, we're going to use scale fill Brewer, which allows you to use a palette of colors. So instead of actually naming each color you want to use, scale fill Brewer has different palettes that already have groups of colors assigned to whatever palette you choose. So for this one, we use set 3, which brought in this yellow and blue color. In a little bit, we'll give you guys the website so that you can see all the different palettes and you can kind of mess around with those because there's some really fun ones in there. And then after that, we're within the scale fill Brewer, we are giving the name to the legend as well. So that's what this name equals, is flu shot history. And then after that, it's pretty much what we've been doing. We just have our labels with the X-axis and the Y-axis. And then as well, we have the title, and it may look a little funky because it has that \n in there, if you can see that. And that just breaks the title up into 2 different lines, because otherwise it's kind of a long title, so it would have been going off the edge of the graph. So we just put that \n in there, and that splits up the 2 lines. And you can put that wherever you want within the title, and it'll just split it up after that \n. Oh, and Dr. Harris said it stands for new line. So that's what that means. And then after that, we just have our theme minimal, and that can be changed like you've already seen, depending on what theme you'd like to use. Okay. All right, so now, any immediate questions with that? Okay. Now we'll go ahead and show the group bar plot. So for this one, like I mentioned, it's just a little easier to digest the data that you're wanting to visualize. So that's why it's more of a go-to. It's just, you can see here, we're showing the same information. We have vaccination intention on the X. This time we actually have % on the Y, which I'll get into in a little bit. But we're still essentially showing the same thing with flu shot history with the difference. So like I said earlier, if you said yes to vaccine intention, you can see how many said yes to flu shot, if they've gotten a flu shot, or no, they have not gotten a flu shot. So it's just a little quicker to digest, and especially if there were more categories, it's just a little easier for the reader. And so I'll go ahead and go through the code here really quickly and then give a quick explanation of the graph. So this one's a little bit different than what we've seen before, because instead of doing count, we're doing %. So we are starting with the data set, and then these first 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of code, that all has to do with the % part of it. So we're not going to go into too much detail on that tonight. But if you are really interested in using percents in your graph, that's the code that gets you to that point. You'd switch out the variables in the group bys, but otherwise it stays pretty much the same. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to put that in the chat. But that's what those four lines that we are piping are getting us that percent on the y-axis instead of just a count like we've seen before.
Yeah, and this is a good example of so where the pipe function is used, and then when we get into Ggplot, we start with the addition sign, which is a new layer. So we're going from using pipes to layers.
Yep, as soon as we pipe all of that into Ggplot, you can see we now use those plus signs. So after those first 4 lines of code, it's pretty similar to what we've seen. So we have Ggplot with the aesthetic, with the X equals being vaccination intention and Y equals percent, which is what is helping us get to that percent on the Y-axis. And then we're filling it with flu shot history, just like we did before. And then still G on bar to get that bar plot. With this one, if you like a grouped bar plot rather than a stacked, you have to do position equals dodge, which you can see here in the code. Because the go-to, if you don't put anything, it'll make it a stacked bar plot. So if you'd like it to be grouped, you just have to put that position equals dodge. And then the stat equals identity has to do with the percent as well. So if you're adding in that percent on the y-axis, you'll need that stat equals identity line there within the G on bar layer. And then again, we're just adding that to, or the next layer we're adding is the labels. So we have X equals and Y equal layers with the title. Again, it has that \n, which is for the new line in the title, since it's a longer title, so then it doesn't run off the side of the graph. And then here, we're changing it a little bit. Previously, we had scale fill Brewer, which has the sets of colors, whereas this one we have scale fill manual. So these you can actually put individual names of colors, as you can see here with the values equal, and then you'll just need however many bars you have, that's how many colors you'll need to put in. So we only have yes and no flu shot history, so we only need to put in we only need those 2 colors to account for those 2 bars. And I think someone mentioned earlier cornflower blue was their go-to, so that's where we have that here. And then similar to last time, you just put the name of the legend within that scale fill, so we have flu shot history to name that. So I know it may look a little intimidating with some of the code at the top especially, but that, like I said, that just gets you that percent on the y-axis rather than the count. And so if you look at the graph, you can see of those who said yes, that they do intend to get the COVID vaccine, 80% of them said they have gotten a flu shot in the past, or a little over 80%. And then a little below 20% have not gotten a flu shot. And so this was really interesting to look at, because in the literature with any vaccine, it's much more common you'll get the vaccine if you've gotten previous vaccines in the past. So that became pretty apparent with this data as well, because you can see of those who are not intending to get the vaccine, there are more people, which looks like a little over 60%, who have not gotten a flu shot in the past 12 months. So that was interesting to look at with this graph. And I think that's all I have for this one. Are there any questions before we move on to the next portion that I can help answer? And on this one, we didn't have a theme. You're more than welcome to, or I don't believe, unless there is another line, but that's really just up to your preference. All right, not hearing any questions. So if there aren't any, we can go ahead and move into this You Try It activity. So this is going to be similar to what you did in the first one. So the code should already be in the participant file. Is that right, Zoe? Okay. And then so we were looking at flu shot history, so you'll just need to change that for this. You try it to political beliefs, so we can look at that variable instead. And then you can mess around with the colors. So there'll be 6 bars within political beliefs. So you'll need to choose 6 colors total. So you'll just need to replace plum 2, plum 3, and plum 4. And you can go to this website, colorbrewer2.org, and look at the colors and pick whichever ones you'd like to mess around with. And then you'll have to change the labels on the axes similar to last time to correspond with our new variable being political beliefs. And you're also welcome to try another theme. If you like theme minimal, you can use that one. There are a few more, and those are listed on this website if you'd like to check those out as well. So we'll give you guys 5 minutes or so, and we can give more time if needed. And just give us a thumbs up when you're ready. And again, if you have any questions, put them in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself and we'll try to answer those. And then if anyone would like to show their beautiful graph with their colors and everything, we would love to see that. So we'll ask for volunteers after as well. So we can go ahead and get started with that. And like I said, just give us a thumbs up when you're good to go and let us know if you got any questions. And we'll leave this slide up on the screen as well so you can see everything you need to change for this You Tried activity. And it looks like Jeff added in the chat a link to some color names. So thank you, Jeff, for doing that. If anyone wants to check that out. All right, is anyone still working? I'm not sure if I've seen everyone's thumbs up. We can still, or actually, if you're still working, go ahead and give me oh, I see some more thumbs up actually. Okay. If you're still working, let me know and we can wait another minute or so. No rush at all. Looks like a couple of people may still be working. We'll give it another minute or two. And again, let us know if you have any questions that we can help with. All right, I think I've seen the majority of people put a thumbs up for now. So if you're still working, feel free to keep working on that. I first wanted to see though, are there any volunteers that would like to show their graph? I'd love to see what colors you guys have come up with or if you've used any other themes. Let us know. We'll take any volunteers if anyone's willing to show. We'll just have you share your screen. Any takers?
Oh, you got a volunteer. Take Robin.
Robin? Great, thank you, Robin. I believe, are you able to share your screen, Robin, or we may have to make you a co-host?
No, right now I can't share it.
Oh, okay. I think you were just made the co-host, so maybe try now. And just talk us through your graph and love to see the colors and the themes you chose.
Alrighty. Yep, so I just stuck with the classic theme because it looks the best. And for colors, I went to the color Brewer and chose this selection, which is apparently good for colorblind people, and I just like blue, so it seemed to work out.
We're not able to see your screen, or I'm not able to. Are you
sorry? There you go.
There we go. Perfect.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. Thank you.
Okay, here it is.
That looks great.
That looks really good.
I'm so glad she shared it with me. Mine looks terrible compared to that.
Yeah, that looks really good. Thank you for sharing. Would anyone else like to share their graph? We'd love to see them. Dr. Harris, did you still want to show yours? Or
Sure, I'll show mine.
okay.
You can see how much better of a designer Robin is. There's mine. And so I just chose the 3 plum colors that were listed in the instructions and then 3 other colors from that thing that Jeff sent. And let's see, I changed the name of this to political beliefs right here. Changed political beliefs in this group by here and this one here for the fill. I think that's all I changed. I added the black and white theme to get rid of that gray background. So I thought this was an interesting graph. You can see that the yes group has a lot more liberal and very liberal and somewhat liberal people in it, and the no group has more mixed and somewhat conservative. Anyway,
I really like the colors. It makes me think of Daphne from Scooby-Doo.
yeah, with that green.
All right. Any other anyone else want to show their graph before we move on? Or did anyone have any questions or any issues with running that code? All right, not hearing anything. So Zoe, you can go ahead and show what we had if you want to share again.
Yeah. 1 second.
Thank you, Robin and Dr. Harris, for showing your graphs.
Okay, so we had, Megan's going to explain this, but I'll just say really quickly. Our code was the same, but then we added a little bit more after this.
All right, yeah. So this is just an example of how you could have approached the You Try It. I forgot to mention this earlier, so I apologize. But if you were keeping that percent in, you do have to alter the variables that are in that first 4 line of code to correlate with what the new political beliefs variable. So I apologize if that tripped anyone up. But otherwise, yeah, we just used the plum 2, plum 3, plum 4 from previously and added those new colors in that scale fill manual. Also changed the labels to correlate with the new variable as well. But otherwise, it's pretty much the same, and also changed the name of the legend. So this is another way you could have looked at it. And then on this graph, you can go ahead. I think there's a couple more lines, Zoe. Okay, there we go. So this one looks a little bit different. So you can see that the graph is showing different things than what we were looking at previously. So this one, it's technically, I believe, the x-axis, but we flipped it, and I'll explain that in here in just a second. And it's now showing, for example, for political beliefs, if you identified as very liberal, what percentage of people said yes, that they are getting the COVID vaccine, what percentage said no, and what percentage said don't know, not sure. So this is another way that you could look at it and mess around with it. And let me see with the code here. So once you get into the Ggplot, it's pretty much the same as what we've seen before with the X and the Y axis in the fill, like that's all the same. Adding in the geom bar with the position and the stat, having the labels. Here we still use scale fill manual and just had those 3 colors rather than the 6 to correspond now with there only being 3 bars rather than 6. And then the name of the legend, and as well the guide, I believe, that reversed the order of the legend. And Dr. Harris or Dr. Cooper, correct me if I'm wrong on that. So that's another little nifty tool you can do to mess around with the legend as well. And then we added the theme. And then lastly here, you'll see chord flip. So that's what flipped the graph to it looks a little bit different than what we're used to. So Zoe, can you go back to the minimal again and just go, yeah. So if you don't have chord flip, this is what it would look like. And as you can see, it's really hard to see what it's showing, especially there on the bottom on the x-axis because the lines are overlapping. So if you go to the chord flip, it all it does is flips the graph as it says, and now you can see what each line says a lot better. So that's just another fun tool you can do to mess around with the orientation of the graph. Just really depends on how you want to show your data, and it depends, I like to use that when those words are overlapping so that you can see a lot more clearly.
And what I really like about this graph, kind of going off of what Dr. Harris said, you can really see how that the very liberal individuals have most of them, 80%, about said that they would get a vaccination. As you get more conservative, it goes down. And then for those who said that they would not get a vaccination, which is the middle color, that goes down the opposite way. And I just think this graph is pretty cool. Yeah. And are we going to take a little break, Megan?
Yeah, I was going to ask, so yeah, we can go ahead and take a break here, but before we break up, are there any questions? I think we'll be done with the bar plots for the most part after this. So any questions about that? I know there's been some questions going on in the chat, but anything we can try to help answer. You're welcome to put it in the chat, but you're also welcome to unmute yourself if that's easier as well. All right, I'm not hearing any. I know I see some in the chat, so I know Dr. Harris and Dr. Cooper are working through those, so hopefully those can get answered in the chat. Otherwise, I don't want to keep us too long for now, so we've already been here for an hour, so I'll go ahead. We can do about a 5-minute break. So it's 7:08 now, so we'll say 7:15. That'll give us about 7 minutes. Or 6 minutes now. We'll come back and start back up with a new type of graph. And like I said, you can keep putting your questions in the chat and we'll get those answered as well. So I'll see you at 7:15. Thank you guys. All right, it looks like it is 7:15, so I hope you all enjoyed your break. We'll go ahead and get started back and start into a new type of graph.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, we use histograms for continuous or discrete data that are measured on an interval scale. So it's going to look like a bar graph, but since age is continuous, there will be no gaps between the bars. Okay, so just like we have in the previous graphs, we bring in the data and we use the pipe function for a Ggplot, and then we add the layer. And so for this one, we are using geom histogram, and the bin width is how thick you want the bars to be. So in the next one, the next histogram, I'll change that and make them a little thicker so it's easier to see. But let's see, what else did I add? Okay. That's weird. Okay. I used a different palette, but it doesn't seem to be appearing. Either does the up next part of it. So I will just move on to the next histogram because that has the same things on it. Okay, so we had a question earlier about how to do an outline. The answer is the same. Use the color part, and that will give you the outline, and then the same fill. Again, I use slate gray, just like that one. And then alpha is how transparent or opaque you want it to be. So 0 would make it completely transparent, and 1 would make it opaque. Oh, continuing on, I added a title, added labels, and then for this one, so going back, we don't have an age that starts before 18. And so I just wanted to make it look a little better. So I made the limit 18 to 60. And not all of them, but most of the people we had were above 60 on our box plot graph showed that they were outliers. So I just ended it at 60 for this one. Does anyone have any questions? I know I was a little confusing on this first one. I can't see the chat, so I'm assuming no. Okay. Okay, now back to Megan.
All right. So I believe this is the last type of graph we have to show here tonight. So this one is called a violin plot. For those of you who haven't seen a violin plot, it's kind of a mix between a box plot and a density plot. So it's just a way to show, again, shows graphs that with one categorical and one continuous variable. So Zoe, if you can go ahead and pull the graph up and I'll explain that a little bit more. Okay, so this just shows the distribution of the continuous variable. So in this graph, it's age among the categorical variable, which is the vaccination intention. So I'll go through the code here in just a second, but the width of the line, or what the bar or whatever you want to call that, it changes or fluctuates depending on how many people of that age in this example answered yes, no, or don't know, not sure. So for example, you can see for people who do intend to get the COVID-19 vaccine, much more of them were closer to 20 to 30 age group. Whereas in the no category, which is that orange one, it definitely fluctuates a little bit more. It looks like there's a good chunk between like that 40 to 60 group, and then there is a good chunk between that 20 and 30. So just another cool way to show the data if this is applicable for the data set you're looking at. I think they're kind of fun to mess around with. So in terms of the code, it's fairly similar to what we've seen so far. So just piping that data set into Ggplot, have your x equals, and for the x-axis, and your y equals with the continuous variable, which we have age here. For the geom, you actually use violin. So that's what we have here. So geom underscore violin for the violin plot. And then we're filling it with the vaccination intention. So that's giving it, in this scenario, the different colors of the green, orange, and purple. And then we have the labels. So we have the y-axis and the x-axis labels with the title. Again, same as what we've seen before. The scale, fill, brewer, and for this one we use the palette set 2. And then if you, I can't remember if we mentioned this in a previous plot, but this guide equals false just makes the legend not appear because it wasn't really necessary for this type of graph. It was redundant. So if you'd like the legend to not appear, that's where you would put that as for that guide equals false. And then the same theme, minimal here. Any questions about that violin plot? Okay, we can go ahead and go to the next one, Zoe. I think they're kind of fun to mess around with, so I was excited to show this to you all. So this one is another violin plot, and we're actually incorporating that chord flip that we saw earlier. So this one shows the political beliefs by age. So we did chord flip because, again, it was hard to see the labels for that political beliefs. So having the chord flip allows you to see them a lot easier. So here you can see the distribution of age within each of those categories of political beliefs. So they all fluctuate similarly, except for very liberal, you can see is much younger, it looks like, or at least more younger people said very liberal, which it looks like it just eyeing at 20 to 25 or 30. So it's just interesting to see how that continuous variable is distributed between political beliefs. And as far as the code goes, pretty much exactly the same data being piped into Ggplot with the x and y variables, geom violin again, sorry, I can't talk. And we're filling it with political beliefs, and we have the labels and the title with the scale, fill, brewer. We have the palette of set 2 again. And again, the legend was not very useful in this case. We did guide equals false, and then just added that chord flip at the end to flip the axes so you could see them a lot better. Any questions about that? All right.
Cool. Okay, so now we are going to combine a box plot with a violin plot, and yeah, it looks pretty cool, and you'll get to practice that after this. So we are using vaccination intention age, and then so the color is going to be we are going to fill it with white, but again, alpha is how transparent or opaque you want it to be, and color is the outline of the colors. Yeah. And then we are going, so we start with the geom violin, and then we have added a box plot on top, and we did the same thing. The outline is going to be a vaccination intention. The fill is going to be vaccination intention. The reason we didn't want the fill for the violin plot to be red, green, and blue is because those you wouldn't be able to tell where the violin ends and the box plot starts, stuff like that. Then geom jitter, I think that looks cool. Not exactly, I think those are just, yeah, those are each participant is a different dot, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then we have the labels. And we are using set 2. So I had set 2 on the histogram, which never showed. So now we can see the actual colors. Yes. Okay, so we had guide again equals false. So we get rid of the key. Again, set 2, so the colors are the same. And then the base size changes the font of the title and the axes to be the same. So we are using size 14, and again, theme minimal. So it just takes away the gray. Anyone have any questions on that one?
This one's much more intimidating to look at, but it's definitely fun to mess around with.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any questions, it is your turn to try it. So the code should be, it is in your participant pack, in your participant file. You can change the categorical variable. So you're going to want to keep age, but you can change the variable to whatever categorical variable you would like. And there is a list in your participant file of variables that we have cleaned and put in the .csv that you can use. And you can again change the colors. And just a reminder to change the variable to everywhere it shows up. And add labels for the axes and title, make sure they're in quote and quotation marks. And then you can try another theme. And we, again, will ask for volunteers if you want to try. We also have one to show if no one wants to volunteer. So we'll give you a few minutes.
Like usual, just give us a thumbs up when you're ready to go. All right. Sorry, I think I missed some thumbs up. So can you go ahead and give us another thumbs up if you are ready to go? I just want to see how many people are good. Okay, looks like we're still maybe waiting for a handful, so no problem at all. We'll give it just another minute or two, and then we'll ask for volunteers or show our example as well. And if you're hitting any roadblocks, feel free to let us know and we'll help you through those. All right, I think the majority of people are done. So if you're still finishing up, feel free to keep working through that. In the meantime, I think we're going to go ahead and ask for a volunteer and see if anyone would like to share their graphic and make you the co-host so you can share your screen. We'd love to see what you guys came up with. Looks like Irene in the chat said she is welcome to share hers, so that's great. I'm not sure who has the capability to do this, but we'll just need to make Irene a co-host. Oh, looks like that's good to go.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
I also think that you can hear me. So I changed the name of the variables. I put positive test. And what I did, I also changed the fill to black because white was everything too white, too clear, so I couldn't see that. So instead of changing the background color, I changed the fill of the violin.
Yeah, that looks great. And also looks like you changed the palette for in the Brewer palette. I like that one a lot. That's cool.
I used the paired one and I used the black and white theme.
I like it. Thank you so much for sharing, Irene.
Thank you.
Looks great. Anyone else want to share what they came up with?
I can share mine. It's hard to keep me quiet.
No, you're good. Love to see it.
All right, there's mine. I did the political beliefs by age, and I used the spectral palette, which is one of my favorites. But the one thing that was bugging me about this is that these don't seem like they're in order to me, very liberal, very conservative somewhat. So it's like in alphabetical order. So I went up here and I was going to grab this code, which would change that order. Because it makes them in, it changes the level so they're in whatever order you specified. I'm gonna see if that works. I didn't quite get done with it before you asked for volunteers, so this will be on the fly and we'll see how it goes. Oh, nope. Didn't go well. Chord flip. All right. So yeah, so now it's in order. And you can kind of see the pattern now that the very liberal people are like younger than the very conservative people in your sample.
Looks great. I really like that palette too. It's nice. Like
Yeah, I like it too. It's like a rainbow.
Yeah, right. And thanks for sharing that tip too. That's good to know for the level.
Does anyone else want to share? And it's okay if it's not perfect. I, in our presentation, had a little mess up and no one and you all were great. So thank you.
I can share mine.
Great. Thanks, Audrey.
No problem. Am I able to share? Yes. Okay. Can you remind me what perceived severity was for? Was it for getting infected with COVID or for getting the COVID vaccine?
I believe perceived severity was how, let's see. I'm going to have to pull up our questions on that one unless Megan remembers.
I was just curious so I could better explain the what I found, but I changed the color scheme to dark too, which I like. I like how dark the colors are. And I also just changed the theme. Just I chose theme light. And other than that, that's all I did.
Okay, so it wasn't a question. It was this Likert scale, similar to what perceived susceptibility was, and so it was. It's some words like this, like I will be very sick if I were to contract COVID, and then how much do you agree with that statement?
Okay. And I just realized that I have the same issue that Dr. Harris had, where I just now noticed that my x-axis, I think the labels are out of order. So I guess I would have to do the same thing, just add that extra line of code to give it an order.
Yeah. Well, no, that still looks great. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, I believe it's been a while since I've actually looked at the data, so I should know, but it's been a while. I believe it was COVID-19 can be a serious disease, and then strongly disagree to strongly agree. Sorry, I didn't answer that sooner. My internet was getting a little unstable there.
I guess we can share ours. I actually think we did not put our labels in order either, but I did use a different theme this time, which I think is pretty cool. So similar to what other people had, except for I used the Brewer palette BUP, which goes blue to purple. And then I use the theme dark so that they would show up, those colors would show up a little better. And then one of my pet peeves is when the labels kind of overlap, like we have this on the strongly agree and strongly disagree. So I changed the angle of the text, which is also under theme, something you can do. But if I were to change this, I would go from strongly agree to strongly disagree, similar to what Dr. Harris and Audrey both said.
And I wanted to give a quick note about this as well. If anyone's curious about the perceived susceptibility and severity and whatnot, I won't go into too much detail, but there's just a lot of literature with when you're measuring vaccine intention, the impacts on one's decision on whether to get a vaccine or not correlates a lot with the health belief model, which is where perceived severities, perceived susceptibility come in. So that's why I made these statements for people to strongly disagree up to strongly agree with, to see how the answers to those vary depending on if you're going to get the vaccine or not. So just to give a quick background on that. But Zoe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's our last slide. Is that right? Okay, yep, that is our last slide. So before we close out here, are there any last questions that we could try to answer about Ggplot?
I know there was a question on what we used to make the slides. We used something called Flipbook R. It's kind of new, something that Dr. Harris showed us. And I highly suggest you look it up and play around with it if you want to give a presentation on R, because it shows the code stepwise, which I find super helpful.
I put a link to the tutorial for Flipbook R earlier in the chat. So if anybody's interested in that, you can scroll back through the chat or save the chat file.
All right, if there's no questions, I believe that's all we have. So I just want to say thanks to our ladies and Dr. Harris and Dr. Cooper for having us. I hope our presentation was helpful, and yeah, I hope we get to see some of you in Our Lady presentations in the future as well.
Thank you so much, Megan and Zoe, for sharing your time and expertise with all of us. We really appreciate it, and we've got some great new tools. And I'm happy to stick around and answer questions if anybody wants to stay for a few minutes. Otherwise, we've got another workshop coming up next month on time series, and maybe we'll see some of you there. So join me in thanking Megan and Zoe one more time.
Bye, everyone. Have a good night.